Hi, everyone, and welcome to our December community meeting. This is our final community meeting, I'm pretty certain, of 2023. If you've missed a meeting over the past several months, you can check out previous recordings in our on our YouTube channel. I can pop that into the chat in a moment. I'm Devin Bella and co-founder and organizing member of Art and Climate Action. And I'm really excited that we could all gather today and talk about sustainable publishing and printing. I'm also really excited to welcome friend and colleague Jeff Khonsary to this meeting, and who will give a presentation momentarily on the environmental impact and printing and printing and paper production. Jeff Khonsary is an editor, designer, and publisher with many years of experience. He co-founded and serves as artistic director at Fillip, which is a Vancouver-based arts publishing organization, and is also the director at New Documents, which is a book imprint focusing on books by artists. He also co-founded the acid-free Los Angeles art book market in 2018 and is the North American print consultant for the Keure. Am I saying that right? You'll have to correct me, Jeff. Printing in Belgium. So a few notes before we get started, and I hand it over to Jeff. This is a half-hour meeting, so we'll run till 10 a.m. And we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes for Jeff's presentation, leaving about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions and dialogue. And we're recording the meeting. So if you want to keep your screen off, you're welcome to do that, or your camera off. And if you have to hop off at any point, just know that the video will be posted to our YouTube channel probably towards the end of the month. Okay, well, I'll hand it over to you now, Jeff. Thanks so much again for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Devin, for inviting me, and it's great to meet you all. I'm going to try and fit a bunch of stuff into a very short amount of time. So I'm going to go fast, and if anybody has questions, feel free to interject, or we can wait to the end. It's a pretty small group, so we can kind of be more casual about this. So as Devin mentioned, I do a lot of things, and they're all sort of interconnected around publishing, specifically around art publishing. Fillip was an organization I founded in 2004 that we do sort of critical writing around art and contemporary art and public programming, big conferences, book production, just some projects to give you context for who I am. New Documents is an art imprint that I run on my own. We've done about 30 books. One of the more recent books with artist Raymond Chacon. Acid Free is a collective that I helped found with a bunch of people here in LA. We've done a number of book fairs in LA and special projects for organizations like Freeze. It's an installation that we did with a bunch of publishers at Freeze. Since 2018, I've been working with a printer, and that's sort of the context for this discussion is the idea of production. And the printer is based in Belgium. It's a printer that focuses on art book production and works with a lot of designers and institutions making art books. This is Irma Boom, a great designer on press for the recent Vermeer catalog. And sustainability is sort of a key component of Keure's platform and operations. So that's sort of what I'll focus in a bit upon in this talk. And I also, it's sort of a side gig. I also run a design studio where I design books for other people and other institutions, do some web design work. It's my studio. That's where I am right now. And some projects that I've worked on recently. So as Devin mentioned, and I'm excited to kind of hear sort of what you all are doing as well, but the context of today's talk is about publishing and sustainability. And in thinking about this, I was thinking like what goes into making a book? What are the components? And so I kind of quickly reduced them to three things, which is sort of the ideas, why are you making the book that you're making? You have to have an idea for a book. You have to have quite a bit of labor to produce the book. Let's say a design project that I work on could be like 100 hours of design work to make a book. Editing, hundreds of hours to edit a book with a lot of text, and then production time, the labor of probably dozens, if not hundreds of people to make that book. And then you also have to have raw materials, resources, and the resources are sort of what we'll, I guess, focus on today. But it's kind of interesting to also think about sustainability in terms of ideas or in terms of labor. And I kind of want to loop back a little bit towards those at the end of the talk, because in thinking about the production of anything, it's sort of, I think, a key question is, do I need to do this, or should I be doing this? Should I be making this thing? Should I be spending the time? Should I be spending the resources to make this thing? And after you're done with, you know, exhausting your ideas, labor, and resources, you end up with books and waste byproducts from the book's production. I'm not really counting the book itself as waste, although I guess you could, in a long sense, think of books as eventually being waste, but I'm thinking primarily in terms of books as being something that has sort of a life and a reason for living, and the waste as sort of something that needs to be treated or recycled. So thinking about what are the resources that go into books, these are sort of like the raw materials and the energy used to produce the book. So kind of synthesizing this down to a few things that we could potentially control within the process of making a book. The raw materials could be the paper that you're using to print the book on, the finishing materials that could be like the binding, the book cloth, the board that's used to make a hardcover book, the glue that's used to glue the book together, or the thread used to sew it. The packaging, which would be like, how is the book sent between the finished product and the customer or the publisher. So that could be like the boxes that it's packed in, the shrink wrap that is used to wrap the book, etc. And then there's a bunch of sort of chemistry or chemicals involved in producing books, primarily like ink, but this could also be varnishes or different sort of chemical processes that are used, including things like isopropyl alcohol, things that create chemical waste, basically. And then there's also quite a bit of water that can be used to make each of these sort of elements. So water that goes into producing paper, or that goes into washing plates, et cetera, et cetera. So there's quite a bit of like water that goes into the raw materials of making a book. On the other side, you have sort of the energy, which could be thought of as the carbon footprint of the book, and each of these raw materials also has a carbon footprint. So we'll talk a bit about that. But this could include kind of obvious things like the power to keep the lights on at the plant and to run the machines, the way that your staff is getting from their house to the plant to produce the thing that you're making, and the energy used to send the thing from your factory to an end user. So I wanted to kind of focus on a few kind of things within this, but we can drill down, and if people have questions about sort of other components, like what does sustainable shrink wrapping look like, we can talk about that. But I'm going to talk about like sort of like the major things that are going into production, and then we can kind of go over some of the other things that are considerations. So obviously, a book rather than an ebook, the main component of a book is paper, and although there have been a lot of sort of high hopes around like e-publishing, I think the industry within the art world hasn't really sort of taken up that interest in a real way. At least recently, I haven't seen kind of a huge production of ebooks. And also there's quite a bit of sort of environmental impact that is potential around the production of ebooks, which is sort of outside the scope of this talk, but could be something to consider if you're thinking about ebooks as an alternative. So if you're not making an ebook, you're making a book on paper. And while there are some alternatives to paper made from wood, trees. They're not really, at least within my experience of commercially producing books, they're not that common. There's like stone paper, there's paper made from, vegetable byproducts, but by and large, most people who are making books from trees. And so one way to think about sustainability is to think about making that production of paper more sustainable, and what does that entail? One thing to note is, so there is paper produced from raw wood, and that would be called like virgin paper. And then there's paper produced from recycled paper, other paper, and then there's paper that's made from a mix of virgin wood and recycled paper. I would say the majority of paper in the marketplace, within the commercial marketplace, is mixed between some recycled content and some virgin wood. And there's a few products within the market that are 100% recycled, but it's not the majority of the market. And then there's, maybe like, I don't know, I would say roughly, let's say 60% of the market that's just raw virgin wood paper. So in thinking about like what it means to be sustainable when producing paper, the obvious thing is like, well, let's just use recycled paper. And so there's a few considerations I kind of want to point out. Maybe the group knows all about this, but this is sort of my understanding of the situation. First of all, the pulp that's used to make paper is, unfortunately or fortunately, the byproduct of other production processes. It's a part of the tree that is not used for furniture. I think it's the outer ring of the tree, but I'm not totally sure. It's typically a byproduct of furniture production, basically, which accounts, I think, for quite a bit of tree use. That waste pulp part of the tree is then processed in a way to make paper, usually at mills that are running huge lengths, like a mile long length of a factory that is running very, very fast, and producing paper for a number of processes simultaneously at different thicknesses. So it's producing, large volumes of paper at any given time, let's say for the print industry or for newspaper production or for cardboard or for other means. And to make recycled paper, you need to collect waste paper, the paper that you're recycling. You need to de-ink the paper and then use the resulting pulp to make new paper. And so this requires both the energy and water use. So in thinking about recycled paper, it's important to ask, how is the recycled mill using energy, or what does their water use look like? So there's the idea of recycled paper, which could have its own kind of conundrum around energy use, and then there's virgin wood paper, and that also is very specific ideas around how that paper could be produced. So it's important to kind of like drill down a little bit. Another thing I wanted to speak about is this idea of LED UV printing. It's become more popular within the last probably 10 to 15 years. It's a process by which specific types of ink is used on printed sheets and set through UV light, kind of similar to when you're getting a filling at the dentist. It's interesting in that it has a lot of good qualities for making reproductions. It can be very vibrant, especially on uncoated papers, but there are some environmental considerations. First of all, it unfortunately is quite a subject of a lot of greenwashing, in my opinion, at least. It's used to promote production as a green process, and there is some truth here. Primarily, the amount of energy used to power a production of a book, the printing press, about 60 to 75% of it is powering the press itself, running the paper through the machines, keeping the lights on, running the various processes of the press. The other large quantity of energy is used to dry the sheets. And that's about probably 15% of energy is used to dry the sheets as they're coming off the press. And that keeps the ink from rubbing off and getting messy and sets the overall quality of the prints. So LED UV printing, because it's using light to set the ink, it uses quite a bit less energy, 15%, which is substantial. Unfortunately, the ink that is used within LED UV is actually quite toxic. And if you were to go on the websites of the manufacturers of the ink, it's sort of the caution and the cautions around how to handle that ink are pretty serious. I would say they're, if the ink spills, you are supposed to clear out the facility. You're supposed to bring in waste treatment. You're definitely not supposed to get it on your hands. It's definitely not supposed to get into water supplies. It's a toxic product. It also uses a black ink that can be carcinogenic. So there's, the ink is living on this paper. Hopefully it's set to the paper properly and it's not coming off on your fingers as you're reading the book, which would probably not be that good for you. And there's also the process of treating the waste byproduct of book production. So although some of you maybe know about the way that books are and prints are made, when you're running something through a printing press, you have, let's say, 1,000 books that you want to make. So you're making 1,000 of each sheet of paper that you're printing. To get those 1,000 prints, you need to run a certain percentage of extra paper to get the ink on the machine up to what's called density. So you're running hundreds of sheets to get the ink up to density. And so the main, when we talk about like what the waste byproduct of print production is, it's like other paper. Basically, you're going through a huge quantity of paper to get to the final prints that you're using for your, whatever you're doing. So if it's a book or, poster or whatever. So this could be like, a large quantity. It's like, I don't know the percentage, but and it probably depends on the type of printing, but it's a large percentage of paper that is trash. Could be trash. Hopefully not trash, because you're trying to recycle that paper. The goal is so that paper that you're using, you're making your book, anything that you're not using, all the trimmed sheets, all of that, the goal is to then be able to recycle that one-to-one. So you're making hopefully the same type of paper, paper for production of more books. One of the other kind of real problems with LED UV printing is that it's curing the ink with light it's bonding it to the paper itself. This creates very vibrant production, like vibrant prints, vibrant color. Hopefully is like sealing the ink to the paper and not creating something that could be potentially harmful to people. But that waste byproduct, that paper is very difficult to de-ink, the process of making recycled paper that we talked about here. And that means that the waste byproduct either can't be recycled or can't be recycled like one-to-one. You're sort of downcycling it because your resulting pulp, it's not white anymore. It's some sort of gray shade that can only maybe be used for cardboard, let's say. So that's a serious problem because of the quantity of paper that is potentially recycled, hopefully recycled during print production. The last thing I want to kind of mention is this idea of accountability. And in talking to partners that you guys are working with, and it kind of goes back to this idea of greenwashing. And as the industry becomes more conscious of environmental factors and the idea of sustainability as potentially it's a good thing, but potentially also like a marketing technique, looking at the suppliers for each of the production processes that you're doing and really asking them to be responsible for the claims that they're making. This could be anything from looking at the paper you're using. So major mills, especially in Europe, are very focused on the idea of transparency around production. At least the really good mills are focused on transparency. This could be anything basically as simple as FSC certification, which is a forestry certification for the place that the raw material is coming from. That's sort of like very basic, but it could come down even to CO2 audits for how much CO2 is being emitted to produce, or how much waste water is being produced, where that water comes from, how the mill is powered. This can also go. That also goes to the plant that you're working with itself. What is their composition of energy use, for example? What is the recycling plan for the plant that you're working with, the partners that you're working with? Are they recycling every little bit of plastic? Are they putting all the plastic into one bin, or are they actually separating out the plastic and working with a partner to try to get each type of plastic to be recyclable? So just super quick, the company that I work for, Keure, is a Belgian company. In the last probably 15 years, they've worked pretty extensively to increase the idea of sustainability and the actual CO2 emissions that are produced at the plant, and decrease the actual CO2 emissions that are at the plant, under the direction of our current CEO, who had previously a background in VC funding around green technology. So just a few specs about things that we've done. There's very basic things that sometimes are not done, which is, for example, like removing isopropyl alcohol from the process of washing plates. When you're making a book, there's a bunch of ink everywhere. You need to clean the presses. Traditionally, years ago, isopropyl alcohol would be used to make everything spotless and the prints very clean, resulting prints very clean. In the recent years, most modern plants have removed isopropyl alcohol, but some do not, and it makes the water that you're using to wash the machines unrecyclable, unfortunately. So that's like a key, it's an important thing, but it's sort of like very base level. Can we reduce the water usage? Can we reduce the chemicals that are used in production? What is the way that the plant is powered? So at our facility, because of where it's situated, and this also is a factor for paper mills, it's a matter of like siting your facility near places where green energy is available. Paper mills use large quantities of power, and so you can think about why paper mills are usually situated near rivers, or traditionally, so you traditionally would have the access to green energy through water, hydropower, I guess. I don't know what that's called, but so at our facility, we have access to green energy because of local wind resources. We have been installing and investing in on-site power, which currently is at 30% of our power generation, and we're working towards 50% on-site power generation. It's also important to think about energy audits and accountability. So that could be very complex, but it is important to kind of drill down, where is the energy that you're using, and what is the actual CO2 tonnage of your production. So for scope 2 in 2021, which is our most recent audit, our total CO2 production was at 6.24 tons, which I think is about a couple cars worth of production. That's for a facility with like hundreds of employees running 24 hours production cycle, which feels like pretty good. But we're working to reduce scope 1 and 2 to effectively 0 within 2030. I can see that the time is like getting close. This is really a lot, very, very much time. What does an energy audit look like? That, I can provide some of this. So it kind of comes down to this, like, why make a book? And if all these things are producing waste, it really makes you think about like, what is the impetus? Like, what's the reason for making the book? Does it need to be a book? Does the thing you're working on need to be a book? That is a core question, and I don't think it's like asked often enough. We're living in like a moment of like hyperproduction, like expectations around hyperproduction, and I think it's important to take a step back, because should you be, should your project be a book? That is a question. There's energy consumption. There's a lot of time investment, a lot of other people's time investment to make that book. So it should be a good book. Second, do you need to make 1,000 copies of your book? Do you need to make 5,000? Are you being overly optimistic? The energy used, the resources used to make 5,000 copies of your book is about 5 times the energy and production that is used to make 1,000 copies of your book. So that's an interesting thing to think about, especially within the world of small press publishing, where runs are quite small, and sustainability is sort of built into the idea of production. Small press runs between like 300 and 1,500 copies. It's sort of a sustainable model to begin with, so you're starting from a very strong point. I'll leave it there, and that was an aggressive time limit, but there's a little bit of time for questions, and I'm around. So
Thanks, Jeff. That was wonderful. And yeah, sorry to have you condense all of this great information. But you really kind of provided a nice quick overview of the process, beginning from, the materials and thinking about the kind of back end production, what's happening on site. And also these really important questions that we need to ask ourselves as we go to make work. And it looks like Laura has a question, so I'm going to let her chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. That was super interesting and some great intel. I'm curious if somebody was working at an institution or a gallery and is tasked with making a book for an upcoming exhibition, what would be like 1 to 3 things that you would encourage them to do to try to be like, this book is probably going to happen, but what can I do within my role to maybe make it a more sustainable, responsible book?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because there's a lot of projects that I've seen come through my desk that have this, maybe the project itself is about sustainability, so there's this impetus to make the project sustainable, and there can be a conversation of like, let's think outside the box. And I think that's great. And there are a lot of interesting materials that do think outside the box, that are using there's paper that's made from waste byproduct from beer production, for example, that's commercially available. It's kind of, it's a cool product. But there's also sort of like more basic questions that you can ask, and it doesn't even have to be like that complicated of a question to ask. It's a question of what goes into what's the makeup, the raw material makeup of the paper that you're using. Is it virgin wood? Where is that wood coming from? Is it recycled? How is that paper recycled and produced? And who is the partner that I'm working with to produce the project? And what is their how is their facility run? Like what is their perspective on energy use, or the power of the energy that's used to get their fleet to the plant? Like basic questions that you can talk to your provider or your supplier about. Other things that could be interesting is where is the product being produced? It's a core question for us, especially since a lot of my clients and our clients, about 30-40% of our clients are North American. How are you getting the material from the plant to your end warehouse or house or office or wherever it's going? Can this be done in a more sustainable way? Can you is producing closer to your facility a benefit, or is it outweighed by other benefits by producing in a place that has access to more clean energy, for example? There's considerations around transport, so that could be producing your project with enough time so that you're not FedExing copies, that you're making use of things like slow air which is a concept that uses excess cargo space to on primarily passenger planes, to put pallets on and transport pallets in excess cargo capacity, or things like sea transport, and who are the sea transport partners that you're working with, and what is their sort of profile around energy use. So it can be very basic questions, and it doesn't have to be like thinking outside the box and using like hypothetical or like very expensive materials. There are very good mills. The ones I know about are in Europe, but I'm sure there are ones in North America and Asia as well, that have very aggressive, very interesting profiles. One would be that I could mention is called Lacebo. It's a Scandinavian company. You can go to their website, very detailed energy audits, and a profile that does allow for a lot of accountability about the production of their paper. It's not a recycled, I think some of their paper is recycled, but it's not primarily recycled paper. But it's an example of a company that's like taking great strides to do stuff sustainably, for example.
We have one more question in the chat, Jeff, from Kathleen asked if you could talk more about the plates used in offset printing and if you're able to reclaim or recycle those plates. And I realize we're over time too, so if anyone needs to hop off, don't worry about doing so.
Yeah. This is, I'm up against the limitations of my knowledge, or specifically around the recycling of plates. But the plates themselves are, from my understanding, made from materials that can be recycled if possible. And there's steps within the process that can be removed. I know with that in the at the printer in Belgium that I work for, there's one step, I think it's called the plate setting step, that traditionally does have some raw material that is used to produce that step. And that is a step that can be removed. And I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer, we did remove that step from the production process. And there's this idea, like, in the old days, where the printer would like keep your plates and then you do like a reprint and be cheaper. And that's maybe done some places, but it's not really something that's part of the like modern process for making books. The raw material, I believe metal, is produced in such a way that if done properly can be recycled into new plates, basically.
Thanks, Jeff. You have another question, Laura?
Are there any examples of books or projects that you think have done this really well that somebody could look at to be inspired by if they were trying to recreate something?
Well, it's not specific projects, but it's sort of like a concept, and I think it's where the industry is potentially going. I saw a book, and the title is going to escape me, but I've seen this in a few books, where books are actually taking strides to talk specifically in the colophon of the book about the CO2 equivalent emissions for the production of the book, and doing like an audit of the book itself. I think the industry, at least those forward thinking within the industry, are going to be working towards that. And I think the purpose of that hopefully is not this idea of like offsetting the carbon that is used to produce the book, but with the idea that you're being transparent about that carbon footprint of that book production. And by having that layer of transparency, like showing that that you're hopefully reducing or below other folks' production. So I've seen that in a few projects, and it's projects where specifically they're thinking about sustainability, and I think that is sort of like the kind of the future of where we're at. It's hard to do right now. We don't do it, for example, but I think it is possible, and I think it'll be kind of interesting to see projects that sort of take accountability for their own the impact of their own production. There's also projects that are interesting that use waste paper from other projects. We've done a couple books, and also, I'm sorry that the titles escape me, but email me and I'll send you some links that use either make-readies or use paper that was like not used for production, is sort of sitting on the shelf basically, and just parts of pallets that have for paper that haven't been used. Projects that reuse materials, that's kind of an interesting concept as well. It accounts for a small amount of like what we're doing, but it is kind of an interesting concept.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I think we can wrap up. That was really great, Jeff. And I think we're like really only scratching at the surface here. And so it'd be great to just stay in touch with you and continue the conversation. And, one of the things that we're trying to do at Art and Climate Action and within our respective organizations is really provide resources for our community. So like Laura was asking, like things that we can point to and learn from one another, like finding those opportunities, as well as providing like local resources for printers and publishers who are already thinking about this work. And so, yeah, so I'm excited to keep in touch with you about that and bring you into the conversation again. And Thank you again for spending
Yeah,
time with us and providing your wisdom and knowledge with us.
yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. And nice to see a few friends in the chat. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me or to others. The part of your conversation with people you're working with, whether it be designers or colleagues, people producing material, people producing ideas or concepts, should be sustainability. So I think it's great that this organization is kind of foregrounding that. And yeah, it's exciting to have that be part of the conversation and be realistic about the realities, the expectations, but also like looking forward toward next steps and kind of increasing our work in this area.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time. We'll hopefully you're on our mailing list. If not, follow us on Instagram, and we'll share information about our next gathering. And if you are interested in contributing, I feel like I need to do one plug. ACA is doing its first ever online fundraising campaign. So if you'd like these meetings or want to see ACA continue into the future, please consider making a gift. We'd really appreciate the support. So see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.